The lobby of the hotel exuded calm, but Keanu's sharp eyes didn't miss a thing. He'd chosen a seat tucked away in the corner, a leather armchair positioned just outside the glow of the central chandelier. From here, he could observe without being observed, blending seamlessly into the background. His years of fame had taught him the art of invisibility when needed, and tonight, that skill was invaluable. As he leaned back, letting the soft melody of the piano wash over him, Keanu noticed a young man behind the reception desk. His name tag read Cameron, and his movements spoke of quiet precision. The way he carefully arranged lilies in a tall glass vase, each petal delicately adjusted, caught Keanu's attention. It reminded him of something a close friend once said. How you do the smallest things often reveals your true character. Cameron wasn't just working, he was creating art, even in the mundane. Keanu couldn't help but admire the man's focus and care. But the serenity of the moment didn't last long. The sharp clack of high heels broke through the peaceful hum of the lobby. Keanu turned his head slightly to see a middle-aged couple approaching the desk. The woman's expression was pinched, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer clutch. Her husband followed, his face set in a mask of disapproval. They moved with an air of entitlement that seemed to echo in their every step. Cameron greeted them with a polite smile, his voice calm and welcoming. "Good evening, sir, ma'am. How may I assist you tonight?" The woman didn't waste a moment. "The room service was terrible," she snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "We've stayed here before, and the standards have clearly dropped. I need to speak with someone who can actually do something about it." Cameron's professionalism didn't waver. "I'm sorry to hear that your experience wasn't up to our usual standards. I'd be happy to address any concerns you have." Her tone turned colder. "I doubt you can help. Is there a manager available, or someone higher up?" Keanu's jaw tightened as he listened. He'd seen this before. The veiled insults, the subtle dismissal of someone simply trying to do their job. It wasn't the first time he'd witnessed people assuming superiority based on nothing more than appearances or roles. He shifted slightly in his chair, debating whether to step in, but something told him to wait. The couple continued their tirade, their words laced with impatience and disdain. Cameron, to his credit, handled the situation with grace, never letting his frustration show. Still, Keanu could see the slight tension in the young man's shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the edge of the desk just a little too tightly. It was clear he was used to this kind of treatment, but that didn't make it any easier to bear. When the couple finally walked away, their complaints unresolved, Cameron exhaled softly and returned to his tasks. Keanu watched him for a moment longer, feeling a familiar pang of anger and empathy. He'd been there before, misjudged, underestimated, dismissed. But he knew this wasn't over. The tension in the air felt like the calm before a storm, and the storm came sooner than expected. Barely half an hour later, the couple reappeared, their frustration now boiling over. The woman's face was flushed, her husband's phone gripped tightly in his hand, its screen glowing ominously. "It's freezing in our suite," she exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger at Cameron. "We've tried everything and nothing works. Fix it, now." Cameron maintained his composure, offering to call maintenance or upgrade their room. But the husband cut him off, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't talk down to us," he sneered. "We've already documented everything, and thousands of people have seen it online. You'll regret this." Keanu's patience had reached its limit. Rising from his chair, he moved toward the desk with a calm determination that belied the fire burning inside him. The couple noticed him for the first time as he stepped into the light. Recognition flickered in their eyes, quickly replaced by shock. "You've posted about him online?" Keanu's voice was steady but carried an edge of steel. He gestured toward Cameron, who stood frozen behind the desk. "Let me see what you've shared." The husband hesitated, his confidence faltering under Keanu's gaze. Reluctantly, he handed over his phone. On the screen was a social media post, thinly veiled in its criticism, but undeniably aimed at Cameron. The caption read, "This hotel has fallen so far. Staff like this have no business in a place like Horizon." Keanu's grip on the phone tightened as he returned it. He turned to the couple, his expression unreadable. "You've been coming here for years, haven't you?" he asked. "In all that time, has Cameron ever given you anything less than excellent service?" The couple fell silent, their earlier bravado replaced by uneasy fidgeting. Keanu let the moment hang, his silence speaking louder than any words. Finally, he broke it. "Because from where I stand, he's shown nothing but professionalism and respect. And he deserves the same in return." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for the first time that evening, the couple seemed to grasp the gravity of their actions. But Keanu wasn't done. He had more to say, and this was just the beginning. Keanu's words lingered in the air, thick with unspoken tension. The couple, who had moments ago oozed entitlement and authority, now stood visibly uncomfortable under the weight of their actions. For a brief second, Keanu thought they might apologize right then and there. But instead, the man squared his shoulders, a flicker of indignation returning to his face. "I think you're misunderstanding the situation," the man said, his tone sharp but noticeably less confident. "We're loyal patrons of this hotel. We've been coming here for years. We expect a certain standard, and when it's not met, we have every right to express our frustration." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his calm demeanor never faltering. "You're absolutely right," he said, his voice measured. "As guests, you have the right to voice your concerns. But there's a difference between raising an issue and targeting someone personally, especially someone who's just doing their job with dignity and professionalism. Wouldn't you agree?" The woman glanced nervously at her husband, clearly realizing they were out of their depth. Keanu's reputation wasn't just built on his films. It was his unwavering humility, his ability to stand firm in the face of injustice, that had endeared him to millions. The couple might not have known it yet, but they were up against more than just a celebrity. They were facing a man driven by principle. Cameron, standing behind the desk, looked between Keanu and the couple, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His face was a mix of gratitude and disbelief. For someone like Keanu Reeves to step in, someone who could have stayed silent, who could have walked away without a word, was almost unfathomable. The husband, clearly flustered, gestured toward his phone. "Fine," he muttered. "We'll take the post down. This is getting blown way out of proportion." Keanu's lips curved into a small, humorless smile. "Taking the post down is a start, but it's not enough. Words have consequences. You've put Cameron in a position where his integrity is questioned, not because of his actions, but because of your assumptions. That's not something you can erase with a delete button." The woman finally spoke, her voice quieter now. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. We were just frustrated, that's all." "Frustration is no excuse for disrespect," Keanu replied evenly. "Think about how you'd feel if the roles were reversed. Imagine being judged, not for your work ethic or your character, but for something as superficial as your appearance or job title. Wouldn't that sting?" The couple exchanged uneasy glances, their defenses crumbling under the weight of Keanu's words. The woman opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Keanu turned to Cameron. "You've handled this situation with more grace than most people could. It's your call. How do you think this should be resolved?" Cameron blinked, clearly taken aback. "Me?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "Yes, you," Keanu said with a nod. "You're the one who's been wronged here. What do you think is fair?" For a moment, Cameron looked as though he might decline the offer. But then, something shifted in his expression. He straightened his shoulders, drawing a deep breath. "I appreciate an apology," he began, his voice steady but firm. "But it can't just be words. If they're truly sorry, they'll acknowledge what they did publicly, the same way they tried to humiliate me publicly. And moving forward, I hope they'll treat every staff member here with the respect they deserve." Keanu smiled, his approval evident. "That sounds fair to me." The couple hesitated, but under Keanu's steady gaze and the mounting guilt in their own hearts, they relented. "We'll do it," the man said reluctantly. "We'll apologize publicly and take down the post." With that, the tension in the lobby began to dissipate. Keanu thanked Cameron for his composure and reassured him that things were about to change, not just for him, but for everyone working at the hotel. The following morning, Keanu called an emergency meeting with the hotel's staff and management team. Word had already spread about the events of the previous night, and the room buzzed with curiosity and quiet excitement. For many of the employees, this was their first time seeing Keanu in person, and the realization that he was not just a guest, but the new owner added a palpable energy to the room. Keanu began the meeting with a straightforward acknowledgement of the issues at hand. "Last night wasn't an isolated incident," he said, his tone serious but compassionate. "It was a reflection of something much bigger, a culture in which employees are expected to endure disrespect just because the people dishing it out happen to be paying customers. That's not okay, not here, not anywhere." He went on to outline a new policy he called the Fair Hospitality Standard. It was a bold initiative designed to protect employees from mistreatment while maintaining the high level of service the hotel was known for. Under this policy, any guest who engaged in abusive or discriminatory behavior would face immediate consequences, including potential bans from the property. The room erupted into applause, the sound a mix of relief and gratitude. For too long, many of the staff had felt powerless in the face of rude or entitled guests. Now, they finally had a leader who was willing to stand up for them. Cameron, who had been invited to speak during the meeting, shared his perspective. "I've worked here for 5 years," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "And in that time, I've seen a lot of good people leave because they didn't feel supported. What happened last night wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. And knowing that we have someone like Mr. Reeves in our corner, it makes all the difference." Keanu placed a hand on Cameron's shoulder, a gesture of quiet solidarity. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about us, about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued, no matter their role. That's how we build something worth keeping." As the meeting wrapped up, Keanu could see the change in the faces around him. There was a newfound sense of hope, a belief that things could and would get better. But the real test lay ahead. Implementing the new policy and ensuring that it became a lasting part of the hotel's culture. Later that day, as Keanu walked through the lobby, he noticed Cameron arranging a fresh bouquet of orchids at the reception desk. The flowers were vibrant and delicate, their petals catching the afternoon light. "Orchids today?" Keanu asked, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Cameron looked up, his own smile warm and genuine. "They remind me of resilience," he said simply. Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's fitting. This place, these people, it's all about resilience. And it's only going to get stronger from here." As Keanu walked away, he felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. The events of the past 24 hours had been challenging, but they had also been necessary. In standing up for Cameron, he had done more than resolve a single conflict. He had set the stage for a culture of respect, fairness, and integrity that would define the Horizon Skylark for years to come. And that, he thought, was a legacy worth building. The atmosphere in the Horizon Skylark Hotel shifted noticeably in the days following the confrontation. Keanu's leadership wasn't just about resolving a single incident. It was about setting the foundation for a new culture, one that would ripple far beyond the marble walls of the hotel. The fair hospitality standard, which had been introduced in the morning meeting, quickly became a focal point for discussion among employees and even guests. Cameron, who had been at the heart of the conflict, found himself the subject of quiet admiration from his co-workers. Many approached him to share their own stories, instances where they'd been treated poorly by guests, or when their efforts had gone unrecognized. For years, these stories had been told in hushed voices behind closed doors, but now they were being shared openly, and the staff felt a newfound sense of solidarity. Keanu made it a point to stay present and engaged. Unlike other owners who might have viewed their purchase as a passive investment, he was deeply involved. He walked the hallways, stopping to talk with housekeeping staff, kitchen workers, and security personnel. His questions were genuine, his curiosity unforced. He asked about their challenges, their ideas for improvement, and most importantly, how they felt about their work. One afternoon, as he passed the laundry room, Keanu overheard two housekeepers chatting. "I've worked in hotels for 20 years, one of them said, "and I've never seen an owner care so much about what we think." The comment stayed with Keanu. He knew that changing the culture of a place required more than just policies and meetings. It required trust, and trust could only be built through consistent actions. One of Keanu's first major initiatives under the Fair Hospitality Standard was to implement a new feedback system. This wasn't just a suggestion box tucked away in a corner. It was a comprehensive platform where employees could anonymously report incidents of mistreatment, share ideas for improvement, and provide honest feedback about their experiences. Each report was reviewed by a dedicated team, with Keanu personally overseeing the more serious cases. It didn't take long for the system to bear fruit. Within the first week, several employees came forward to share instances of guests behaving inappropriately or management failing to support staff. One story, in particular, stood out. A server in the hotel's fine dining restaurant recounted how a wealthy regular had repeatedly made inappropriate comments toward her. Despite her complaints to her supervisor, nothing had been done. When Keanu read the report, he felt a familiar surge of frustration. It was the same sense of injustice he'd felt watching Cameron being dismissed by entitled guests. But this time, he was in a position to do something about it. Keanu called a meeting with the restaurant staff, inviting the server to share her story in a safe and supportive environment. With her permission, he also addressed the issue with the guest directly, making it clear that such behavior would not be tolerated. The guest, embarrassed and caught off guard, offered a hasty apology, but the message was clear. The days of unchecked mistreatment were over. For the staff, the impact was profound. Seeing their concerns taken seriously and acted upon sent a powerful message. They mattered, and they were not alone. Meanwhile, news of Keanu's approach began to spread beyond the hotel. Rival establishments took notice, some even reaching out to ask about the specifics of the Fair Hospitality Standard. Guests who had heard about the changes began leaving glowing reviews, praising the hotel not just for its luxurious accommodations, but for its commitment to fairness and respect. Among the most surprising responses was an email from a former employee of the Skylark. Zoe, a former housekeeping manager, wrote to Keanu to thank him for what he was doing. "I left this hotel 2 years ago," she wrote, "because I felt like no one had my back. Seeing what you're doing now makes me wish I had stayed. I hope you know how much this means to the people who work there." Keanu replied personally, thanking her for her kind words and inviting her to visit the hotel anytime. He also shared her email with the current staff as a reminder of why their efforts mattered. Cameron, who had once been reluctant to speak up, began to find his voice. At Keanu's suggestion, he started mentoring newer employees, sharing his experiences and helping them navigate the challenges of working in hospitality. His confidence grew, and with it, his reputation as a leader among his peers. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Not everyone welcomed the changes with open arms. Some longtime guests, accustomed to having their whims catered to without question, bristled at the new policies. One guest, upon being informed that abusive behavior toward staff would no longer be tolerated, angrily demanded to speak to Keanu personally. When the guest confronted him, Keanu remained calm and firm. "We value your business," he said, "but not at the expense of our employees' well-being. If you can't respect that, then perhaps this isn't the right place for you." It was a bold stance and not without risks. Losing high-paying customers could have financial consequences, but for Keanu, it was a matter of principle. And to his relief, most guests responded positively, appreciating the hotel's dedication to integrity. One evening, as Keanu walked through the lobby, he noticed Cameron at the front desk, helping a guest check in. The guest, an elderly woman, was smiling as Cameron patiently explained the hotel's amenities. It was a small moment, but it reminded Keanu of why he had started this journey in the first place. He approached Cameron afterward, clapping him lightly on the shoulder. "You're doing great work," he said. Cameron grinned, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thanks, Mr. Reeves. I couldn't have done it without you." Keanu shook his head. "Don't give me too much credit. You were already doing the right thing. I just made sure others could see it." As the weeks went on, the hotel continued to thrive. The staff felt more connected and supported than ever before, and guests began to take notice of the positive energy that permeated the building. It wasn't just a place to stay. It was a place where people treated each other with dignity and respect. Keanu knew the work wasn't done. Cultural change was a slow process, and there would always be challenges along the way. But he also knew that they were moving in the right direction. One evening, as he sat in the same leather armchair where it had all begun, Keanu reflected on the journey so far. He thought about Cameron, about Zoe, about all the people who had shared their stories and found their voices. They were the true heroes of this story, he realized. They had faced adversity with courage and grace. And in doing so, they had inspired him to do the same. Looking around the lobby, Keanu felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The Horizon Skylark wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a symbol of what could happen when people stood up for what was right. And that, he thought with a smile, was a legacy worth fighting for. The Horizon Skylark Hotel was no longer just a building with polished floors and luxurious rooms. It had become a symbol of dignity and respect. Word of Keanu Reeves' transformative leadership spread like wildfire, reaching far beyond the hotel's walls. Employees at other establishments began sharing their own stories of mistreatment, drawing inspiration from what was happening at the Skylark. Social media lit up with conversations about workplace fairness and the importance of holding both employees and customers accountable for their actions. Keanu had never intended for his actions to garner so much attention. For him, it wasn't about publicity. It was about doing what felt right. But as more people learned about the fair hospitality standard, the story began to take on a life of its own. Articles appeared in online magazines, praising the hotel for its innovative policies. Guests who had stayed at the Skylark shared glowing reviews, emphasizing the warmth and professionalism of the staff. Even rival hotels started contacting Keanu's team, curious about how they could implement similar practices. One evening, Keanu received an unexpected visitor at the hotel. A middle-aged man in a simple suit approached him in the lobby, introducing himself as Richard, the general manager of a nearby hotel. "I've been following what you've done here," Richard said, shaking Keanu's hand firmly. "It's inspiring. I'll be honest. I've struggled with handling situations like the one you faced with Cameron. Guests come in, act entitled, and my team bears the brunt of it. I'd love to learn how you're making this work." Keanu invited Richard to sit with him in the lounge, where they spent the next hour discussing the challenges of balancing guest satisfaction with employee well-being. Keanu shared not just the policies they'd implemented, but also the philosophy behind them. It's not just about protecting employees. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued. Guests notice when staff are happy and motivated. It creates a better experience for everyone. As news of the Skylark's transformation spread, it began to attract a new kind of guest. Families, solo travelers, and professionals who valued kindness and integrity started choosing the hotel, not just for its amenities, but for what it represented. Among them was a woman named Linda, a travel blogger, who had heard about the changes and wanted to see them firsthand. During her stay, Linda made it a point to talk to the staff. She asked them about their experiences and how things had changed since Keanu had taken over. What she heard moved her deeply. One housekeeper shared how she'd once been berated by a guest for accidentally knocking over a glass of water, an incident that had left her in tears. "Before, no one would have done anything about it," she said. "But now, I know my manager has my back. It makes all the difference." Linda wrote a heartfelt blog post about her stay, praising not just the hotel's facilities, but its atmosphere of mutual respect. Her words struck a chord with readers, many of whom began to rethink their own behavior toward service workers. Keanu read the blog post one quiet evening in his office. As he scrolled through the comments, he was struck by how many people shared similar sentiments. One comment stood out. "I never thought about how my words might affect someone working in hospitality. This story made me realize I need to do better." Meanwhile, within the hotel, the staff continued to thrive under the new policies. Cameron, who had once been hesitant to stand out, had become a quiet leader among his peers. His story had inspired others to speak up, and he was often the first to welcome new employees, offering them guidance and support. One afternoon, Keanu found Cameron in the lobby, chatting with a young woman who had just joined the front desk team. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting as Cameron spoke to her. Keanu couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw the way her posture began to relax, a small smile replacing the tension on her face. Later, Keanu approached Cameron. "You've got a knack for making people feel at ease," he said. Cameron chuckled, his cheeks flushing slightly. "I guess I just remember what it was like to feel out of place. If I can help someone avoid that, I'm happy to do it." Keanu nodded, his respect for Cameron deepening. "You're exactly the kind of person this place needs," he said. Not all responses to the fair hospitality standard were positive, however. A small but vocal group of critics accused the hotel of prioritizing employees over paying guests. One particularly scathing editorial claimed that the policies were a dangerous precedent that could alienate loyal customers. Keanu read the article with a measured calm. He understood that not everyone would agree with his approach, but he was resolute in his conviction. Instead of issuing a defensive statement, he invited a journalist from a respected publication to visit the hotel and see the changes firsthand. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, arrived with a healthy dose of skepticism. She spent 3 days at the Skylark, speaking with staff and guests alike. By the end of her stay, she was a convert. Her article, titled "A New Standard for Hospitality," painted a vivid picture of a hotel that had managed to balance luxury with compassion. In one particularly poignant passage, Claire wrote, "The Horizon Skylark doesn't just provide a place to stay, it offers a glimpse into what the service industry could be. A space where kindness is prioritized as much as profit, and where respect flows in every direction." As the weeks turned into months, the impact of Keanu's leadership continued to grow. The hotel's profits rose, bolstered by the influx of new guests who appreciated its values. Employees reported higher job satisfaction and lower turnover rates, and the fair hospitality standard became a model for other establishments to emulate. But for Keanu, the true reward wasn't in the numbers. It was in the moments of connection he witnessed every day. A housekeeper laughing with a guest over a shared joke, a chef beaming with pride as a customer complimented their meal, a receptionist feeling confident enough to stand their ground against unreasonable demands. One evening, as Keanu stood in the lobby watching the sunset paint the walls in hues of gold and amber, he was approached by an elderly couple. They introduced themselves as Mary and Tom, long-time guests who had been staying at the Skylark for over 2 decades. "We've seen this place change hands more times than we can count," Mary said, her voice warm and kind. "But we've never felt the way we do now. It's like this place has a soul again." Keanu smiled, deeply moved by their words. "That means more to me than you know," he said. As the couple walked away, Keanu allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The journey had been far from easy, but it had been worth every challenge. The Horizon Skylark was no longer just a hotel. It was a community, a place where people could find not just comfort, but connection. And as Keanu watched Cameron arranging a fresh bouquet of lilies at the reception desk, he knew that this was just the beginning. The ripples of change they had created together would continue to spread, touching lives in ways they could only begin to imagine.